How did you come to create such well-drawn older characters, particularly female characters?
My mum lives in a real retirement village in England, and it's such a beautiful place, and I would go down there a lot, and it was very bucolic, and like any sort of Agatha Christie fan, it occurred to me that it would be an amazing place for a murder. And then when you started talking to the people who lived there, all of whom were over 75 and had done these extraordinary things with their lives, I suddenly thought, well, if there was a murder here, I bet you lot would solve it. And so the Thursday Murder Club is born. Any woman in their 70s or 80s, whatever job they've been in whatever sphere, they have been underestimated. They've A, been underestimated, and B, they've had to work 10 times harder than anyone around them. So I know that they've got a lifetime of that, which means suddenly you put them in this environment where actually there is, some equivalence between them and the men, and their skills can come to the fore. And if you've given people a lifetime of being sort of broken down or patronised, and suddenly they're not being broken down or patronised, it's an extraordinary superhero skill that they've got. Elizabeth essentially was sort of forged in the Cold War. And now, yeah, she visits vengeance upon the bad guys of Sussex. I think she's had a career of being able to call upon, sort of tanks and warplanes any time that she wanted to. But Ron, for example, would be based on my grandfather. My grandfather was a police officer in the 60s and 70s, and a very, very, very tough man, but also the kindest man I ever met. So he had that real strength and kindness, which to me is a sort of masculinity which is going out of fashion because the way our culture is going. And so that, to me, Ron kind of represents a kind of version of masculinity which comes with a humbleness and a kindness which is something I sort of think is slightly lacking in our current culture.
You also deal very beautifully in the midst of this very witty writing with the grief and loss that accompanies life, particularly as we age.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. I mean, genuinely, I try and I get the advantages of writing about these older people, which is there are fewer consequences to what they do. I enjoy that. I get to use their wisdom. I get to use they're at that stage of life where they care slightly less about what you think of them, which is a very freeing thing. But I can't lie and make it a fantasy and say everything about growing older is great, because of course it's not, because there is death and there's frailty and there's grief and all of those things. And I think so long as you write characters that are truthful, and I think these 4 characters are, and so long as you love your own characters and respect them, you can go from quite broad comedy to talking about very deep grief very, very quickly, because that's what we do in our lives.